Imagine standing on the crumbling grandstands of a once great Formula One circuit. The pit lane is silent, the track overgrown with weeds, and the only sound is the wind howling through broken fences where legends once raced at 200 miles an hour. Formula One has always been about speed, danger, and evolution, but in its wake, it has left behind ghost tracks. Places where champions once battled, but which now sit empty, forgotten, and decaying. Today, we're asking the haunting question: what happened to the abandoned F1 tracks? Formula One's history isn't just written in trophies and records, it's written on circuits. From the cobblestones of Reims to the forests of the Nürburgring, some of the greatest moments in motorsport happened on tracks that no longer host Formula One. And the reasons they were abandoned tell the story of how the sport itself changed. Safety standards, money, politics, and the relentless march of modernity. Some tracks found new life. Others became ruins, but each one tells a story of triumph, tragedy, and the price of progress. If there's one abandoned F1 track that stands above all others, it's the Nürburgring Nordschleife in Germany. Nicknamed the Green Hell by Jackie Stewart, this 14-mile, 22-kilometer monster of a circuit was unlike anything else in Formula One. With over 150 corners twisting through the Eifel Mountains, it wasn't just a racetrack, it was an ordeal, a test of survival. For decades, the Nordschleife was legendary. It was where the bravest drivers proved themselves, but its size made it impossible to manage. You couldn't marshal every corner. You couldn't cover the entire circuit with medical support. When Niki Lauda's Ferrari exploded into flames during the 1976 German Grand Prix, the flaws became undeniable. Marshals and fellow drivers struggled to reach him. His life was saved by sheer bravery, not by infrastructure. That crash was the end. Formula One never returned to the Nordschleife for a race again. The circuit was simply too dangerous, too long, and too impossible to modernize. But here's the twist. Unlike other abandoned tracks, the Nordschleife didn't die. Today, it lives on as a tourist attraction. Anyone with a car and a bit of courage can pay to lap the same asphalt where Stewart, Lauda, and Fangio once raced. It also hosts endurance races like the legendary 24 Hours of Nürburgring. It's not an F1 venue anymore, but it's still the most infamous circuit in the world. Part racetrack, part shrine, part ghost. If the Nürburgring is still alive in spirit, Reims-Gueux in France is the opposite. A ghost frozen in time. From 1938 to 1966, this track was famous for its lightning-fast straights and slipstream battles. It was pure speed, where cars roared past fields of champagne grapes and French crowds lined the roads. But Reims had problems. Safety was primitive, with little to protect drivers from high-speed crashes. And unlike richer venues, Reims lacked the funding to modernize. By the late 1960s, Formula One had outgrown it. The final F1 race was held in 1966, and then the track was abandoned. What makes Reims-Gueux haunting is that parts of it still exist. The grandstands, pit buildings, and even the start-finish straight remain slowly crumbling. Walking there today feels like stepping into a motorsport time machine. The structures are covered in fading advertisements for old sponsors. Nature creeps through cracks in the concrete. It's not a racetrack anymore. It's a relic. Thanks to a local heritage group, some of the buildings are preserved, not as an active circuit, but as a monument to what once was. Reims is proof of how quickly glory fades. Once the heart of French motorsport, now it's an eerie ghost town. When you look at why Formula One leaves tracks behind, the reasons almost always fall into three categories: safety, money, and politics. And the truth is, all three are as brutal as the sport itself. Let's start with safety. In the early years of Formula One, safety was practically an afterthought. Tracks were designed for speed and spectacle, not for saving lives. Wooden guardrails, hay bales, and sheer drops lined circuits that cars were taking at 170 miles per hour. The Nürburgring Nordschleife is the most famous case. It was 14 miles of twisting blind corners and sheer forest. Drivers loved the challenge, but marshals couldn't possibly cover it all. When Niki Lauda nearly burned to death in 1976, it was obvious. no amount of tradition could justify the risk. F1 had reached a point where survival shouldn't depend on luck or on fellow drivers dragging you out of the flames. But money has killed just as many tracks as safety has. Hosting a Formula One race today costs tens of millions of dollars, and that's just for the right to put it on the calendar. Add infrastructure upgrades, hospitality, and modern paddock requirements, and you're looking at hundreds of millions. Historic circuits like Reims in France or Kyalami in South Africa couldn't keep up. Without government backing or deep-pocketed investors, they were doomed. Even Hockenheim in Germany, once a cathedral of speed, has been squeezed off the calendar in recent years because the price of Formula One is simply too high. And then there's politics, the invisible hand that decides which tracks live and which die. Formula One follows money and government support. That's why we've seen new circuits rise in places like Abu Dhabi, Bahrain, and Saudi Arabia, while European venues steeped in history are abandoned. Politicians use F1 as a tool for soft power, a way to put their nation on the global stage. The sport doesn't just chase speed, it chases headlines and influence. That's why a ghost town like Reims gets left behind while a brand new facility in the desert, built in just a few years, gets a prime slot. The abandoned tracks are more than just forgotten places. They're the casualties of Formula One's evolution. Each one tells us something about the balance between danger, money, and politics. And more often than not, history shows us this: tradition alone isn't enough to save a track. So what happens when the show leaves town? The afterlife of abandoned Formula One circuits is as varied as the places themselves. Some get reinvented, some decay into ruins, and some vanish completely, paved over by shopping malls or housing developments. Take the Nürburgring Nordschleife. When Formula One left, it could have died, but instead, it transformed into something new. Today, it's part tourist attraction, part motorsport playground. Anyone with a car can pay a fee and lap the green hell themselves, from amateurs in rental cars to manufacturers testing supercars. It also remains the home of endurance racing, most famously the 24 Hours Nürburgring. In this way, the Nordschleife never truly became abandoned. It became a living monument to danger, a circuit too wild for Formula One, but still thriving for everyone else. Then there's Reims. Unlike the Nordschleife, it didn't get a second life. It's a skeleton of its former self: crumbling pit buildings, empty grandstands, and silent straights. Walk through it today, and you can still see the faded logos of old sponsors painted on concrete. It's eerie, like a motorsport Pompeii. A local heritage group works to preserve it, not as a functioning circuit, but as a monument. It doesn't roar with engines anymore, but it whispers with history. Other tracks have been partly repurposed. The old Hockenheimring, once a flat-out blast through the forests of Germany, was shortened in 2002. The long straights were abandoned, and nature reclaimed them. Today, you can walk or bike through those forests, tracing the ghosts of where cars once flew at 220 miles per hour. It's not a racetrack anymore. It's a hiking trail haunted by speed. And then there are circuits like Rouen-les-Essarts in France. Once a stunning road course, it was abandoned after fatal crashes and financial struggles. Today, parts of it are public roads. People drive through them every day, unaware that they're crossing a piece of Formula One history. The afterlife of a track reflects the culture around it. Some nations turn them into museums, others let them rot, and others erase them entirely. But in every case, the soul of the track lingers, even if only in the memories of those who once raced there. Abandoned F1 circuits are more than decaying concrete and broken fences. They are ghosts of a sport that has always lived on the edge of danger and progress. They remind us of how far Formula One has come, and how much it has lost along the way. When you stand at Reims, you can almost hear the roar of engines echoing down the straights, Jim Clark and Juan Manuel Fangio locked in slipstream battles. When you drive the Nordschleife, you feel the terror and thrill that made Jackie Stewart call it the Green Hell. These places may no longer host Grands Prix, but they still hold the spirit of the gladiators who raced there. Their legacy also raises uncomfortable questions. Formula One has traded some of its soul for safety and spectacle. Was it worth it? On one hand, yes. Drivers today walk away from accidents that would have been fatal decades ago. On the other, many fans feel the raw edge, the danger, the sheer insanity that defined the sport's early years has been lost. The abandoned tracks are physical proof of that trade-off. And here's what makes them haunting. They are frozen in time. Reims is a ghost town. Old Hockenheim lies buried under the forest. Rouen is a memory carved into public roads. They remind us that Formula One doesn't stand still. It moves forward, leaving even its greatest shrines behind. Yet, they also inspire. Fans travel thousands of miles to walk these ruins, to touch the past, to imagine what it felt like when Fangio drifted through corners or when Lauda fought the flames. These ghost tracks are part of F1's DNA, reminders that the sport was built not only on glamour and money, but on danger, risk, and sacrifice. That's why abandoned circuits are so fascinating. They are not just forgotten relics, they are scars on the landscape of motorsport, scars that whisper the truth. Progress always comes at a cost. Formula One is always looking to the future. Faster cars, richer sponsors, new territories. But in the silence of abandoned circuits, its past is still alive. From the green hell to the ghost town of Reims, these places remind us that while F1 may leave tracks behind, it can never erase the legends that were written on them. The haunting question is, which of today's circuits will become the ghost tracks of tomorrow?